Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Athenaeum Spotlight with Guy McLean and Mark Auerbach. I'm Mark Auerbach. This is Guy McLean. What a great piece of music to start a program with.
I love starting it with Bernstein's Candide. You know, it's such a great piece of music and so upbeat.
It is, and it's one of those wonderful pieces of musical theater that is equally at home in opera as it is on Broadway, and so many orchestras.
And in the concert hall. That overture is done quite a bit in concerts, yeah.
It's a thrilling piece of music, and
Yeah.
you know what's interesting about Candide, I mean, I've seen it a couple of times. There was a Harold Prince production of it where they tore apart a Broadway theater, and they did it in the middle of the theater, not just on the stage. And it was done as a small chamber work, but this piece of music just demands a huge orchestra.
Yeah. It's beautifully written. I mean, Bernstein was not only a great melodist, he came up with these great themes, these great melodies, but he was a great orchestrator as well. And that piece is a good example of that, how he uses the orchestra in such an interesting way. And it's almost like a flavor that no other composer has the Bernstein sound.
Well, you know, I think about Leonard Bernstein because he composed for the orchestra, he composed for the opera world, he composed primarily for Broadway, and some of his Broadway musicals like Wonderful Town or On the Town are very traditional, if you want to call it that. And then you have West Side Story that takes the story of Romeo and Juliet and blows it into operatic proportion, or Candide, which is a simple story of Voltaire, and turns it into this operetta, if you want to call it that, that takes place all over the world.
Yeah. Who would think about taking basically a book about philosophy, 18th century Enlightenment philosophy of all things, and turning it into an opera?
And Candide has roots in Western Massachusetts because Richard Wilbur, the poet, who contributed to the Bernstein operetta. Lillian Hellman wrote the original book, and the lyrics were by Richard Wilbur with Leonard Bernstein. Richard Wilbur lived in Cummington.
Yeah, and he was a professor for many years at Amherst College.
Right, and all that. And then, so Candide opens on Broadway in the 50s, so the same year that My Fair Lady opened, and it fails. People, you know, it lasts 50 performances or so. The lead was played by Barbara Cook, who became well known in musical theater. She was Marion the Librarian in The Music Man, and she was a real interpreter later on in her career, the music of Sondheim and stuff. But that overture lasted. And that's a piece of music that everybody seemed to know. And then in the 70s, Candide was revived. It would be revived in the opera houses on a regular basis, but it was revived on Broadway. And Harold Prince took it over, and he got Stephen Sondheim to come in and write some of the lyrics. And they moved to one song here, and they moved something else there.
Yeah.
And they turned it into what became a really popular musical theater piece.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been done since. And about 5 years ago, Goodspeed announced that Darko Tresnik, who was then the artistic director at Hartford Stage, would mount a brand new production of Candide, and that got scrapped during the pandemic.
Yeah. I mean, I think in some ways Leonard Bernstein is a tragedy in terms of American culture. Leonard Bernstein was probably our most gifted composer who had a wonderful feel for orchestral music and a great conductor. And he was certainly very successful as conductor, but as a composer, he wrote great orchestral works, wrote great musicals and operas. It was very comfortable in musical theater, but he was active at a time when the contemporary music world looked down on musical theater, looked down on anything that was tonal. There was a real push toward atonality at that time, and Leonard Bernstein, who just had a great musical gift, and was a great melodist. He just didn't like going the atonal route, but he was condemned for that. Now we look back and we see that as just totally misguided. But I think he really was a victim of that, and I think Candide suffered from that because it really worked best in an opera house. I think, for that kind of audience, it didn't fit so well themes and this sort of thing with Broadway, but yet it didn't get the performances it should have gotten. It didn't get the attention it should have gotten because it was considered kind of old-fashioned and not up to date in terms of standards of the day.
His last two works. One was called Mass, and it was commissioned to open the Kennedy Center in Washington. And it had elements of musical theater and it had elements of the traditional Mass.
Right.
And it had kind of a pan to pop music of the time.
Exactly.
And
it has a rock band and a jazz band
built
in.
It didn't work.
Well, I think. See, I disagree with that. I think Mass suffered from the same problem as Candide.
It worked in its genre, but I don't think that you could mount a production of Mass now and have it commercially viable. It would have to be in an opera house or in a concert stage.
Yeah.
And his last musical, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, was so musically fascinating and such a bomb.
Right.
That opened and closed
Right.
so quickly. But his work, I think about it a lot. I spent the last week flat on my back and recovering from some illness, and I spent a lot of time with music because I couldn't watch television or watch videos. I didn't have the attention span for it, but I could flip on a CD and catch music. And I did listen to some. I listened to Candide, obviously, and I listened to some Sondheim, and there's something very incredible about Bernstein.
Yeah, and I think also too, Bernstein's not the only victim of a lot of the philosophical perspectives of the contemporary music world in the mid 20th century. I think Gershwin has also suffered from the same thing. Gershwin, I think, wrote probably the best opera to come out of an American composer, Porgy and Bess, but yet many well-trained musicians, people in the contemporary music world that should have known better, condemned that as just for Broadway. He has a couple of good musical tunes and everything, but actually it was a very, very well written, very well constructed opera. And I think it's suffered the same fate. The Metropolitan Opera, which is supposed to, you would think, being in the United States, would represent American opera, did not perform Porgy and Bess until 50 years after it was first premiered. And to me, Gershwin, Bernstein, several other American composers have really suffered from this whole problem of the 20th century is contemporary classical music had to be very avant-garde, very complex, very atonal. And I just think a lot of American voices. And then on top of that, Europe had much more of an established musical culture. America was just getting off the ground with musical culture in the 20th century, and so and we had these incredible talents: Aaron Copland, Bernstein, Gershwin, Samuel Barber, who also wrote some wonderful operas, and they all were just kind of put aside as second, composers of a second tier because of the fact that they wrote tonal music for the Broadway stage. And it was condemned for two reasons. Basically, one, they weren't avant-garde enough, and number two, they were American.
Yeah.
It's like in the classical music world, Europe, European musicians and composers are where it's at, and you can see that today. Look at almost every one of our major symphony orchestras; they're conducted by a European conductor, not an American. There are some interesting exceptions to that rule, but the exceptions of the rule prove the problem that we have in the United States today. We really look down on American art music, and I think it's really sad, and I think Bernstein is a good example of that. It's too bad. It's really too bad. I think we're starting to see some change with people like Kevin Putz, who his opera was premiered by the Metropolitan this last year.
Yeah, the Metropolitan has really switched course to some degree and done some contemporary stuff. But while we're talking about opera and stuff like that, what's going on at the Athenaeum?
Well, speaking of musical performances and speaking of American composers, we have a trip to Tanglewood this summer. We're going to go to an all Gershwin concert at Tanglewood on July 14th. And we're already starting to get a number of people who are signing up for that. We have limited space because we only have a certain number of tickets and only a certain amount.
So do you know at this point, I mean, we talked a couple of weeks ago about the fact that the Athenaeum was going to sponsor this trip. Do we know who's performing at Tanglewood and what the program is?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. They haven't usually, Tanglewood, when they put out their schedule, they list the pieces they're going to play. In this program, they're not doing this. I think they're kind of going to do a real kind of broad selection. I think they're going to bring in a singer and a pianist.
Is this a pops or is this?
Well, it is, and I have to say, this is another issue I have. Gershwin is many times, relegated to the pops orchestras, which to me is kind of a little bit of a put down. But yes, it is a pops concert. But I just thought I want people to have a chance to hear Gershwin's music. But I really think that sends a really mixed message to audiences today. Gershwin is always put on pops concerts rather than the regular serious, quote, serious symphony concerts. And I just think that is wrong. Gershwin wrote some great orchestral music as well as Porgy and Bess, the opera we were just talking about. And to me, that's...
So you got to interject here some really incredible film music, An American in Paris.
Right.
I mean...
Absolutely. But that's the reason he's put on pops concerts is he wrote film music, he wrote for Broadway, and somehow, the orchestral music, he kind of did that on the side. But that's not the case at all. He was a very serious composer, and the only reason we don't have more examples of orchestral music from him and other music is because he died so young.
Yeah, he died at the age of 38.
Yeah.
Just imagine if he had lived another 30 years, what he would have written.
Well, and I think he could possibly have established American opera, as a major voice in contemporary opera.
So this trip that the Athenaeum is sponsoring to Tanglewood, what does it include?
Oh, it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to meet at the Athenaeum at 4 p.m. on the day of the concert. We're going to, we have a bus all lined up. We're going to drive to Lee to one of the restaurants in Lee. Have a nice dinner there. Give a chance for people to socialize with other people on the trip, and then we'll go over to Tanglewood for the concert. We have tickets in the shed, so it should be a lot of fun. Last year we did a very similar itinerary, and it was great. People really loved it. People had a chance to meet others interested in classical music, and a lot of friendships were established on that trip last year. And so we're hoping we'll have even a bigger and better time this year.
Well, that sounds good. And how can people get? You have to obviously reserve this in advance.
Yes.
How do you reserve?
Yes. All you have to do is go down and just go to the circulation desk at the Athenaeum. They can take care of you right there. They can get you all taken care of. The cost of the whole package, transportation, dinner, and the tickets is $135. It's very, very reasonable when you consider all everything that's included in that package. And you can also do it online. You can go to our website, which is westath.org. And you can sign up that way too. You can do PayPal or put in a credit card or whatever you'd like. So you can come down and visit us at the Athenaeum and sign up then. Just write a check and you're all taken care of, or you can do it online.
Summer vacation for a lot of people is just around the corner. I mean, guy, look out the window.
Yeah.
Everything's green and all that stuff.
Right.
Will there be summer programs at the Athenaeum for kids this year like you usually do?
Yes, absolutely. We're going to have we have our summer reading program, which is really very popular, and that's not available. That's not only available for children. There is an adult component. Adults can get involved because we have various contests and various activities connected with the summer reading program, but this is one of our most active programs each year, and I think it's really good too. There's a lot of information out there. Today I just read an article that reading standards are really dropping in the United States. Students today, part of it is pandemic related and this kind of thing, but there's a real concern about reading levels among American students today. And one of the things they found is that kids lose, over the course of a summer, being out of school, they lose some of their reading ability. And so teachers, when they start the school year in the fall, have to kind of go back and bring the students back up, to the level that they had really achieved the previous year. Well, what they found is kids that participate in summer reading programs through public libraries all over the United States really don't lose that reading ability over the course of the summer. So we really are doing a lot of activities to try to keep kids reading through the summer vacation and making it fun for them, having programs involved with that. So I think it's one of our most successful and most important programs that we run at the Athenaeum.
And in terms of the exhibitions and the gallery exhibits,
Yes.
what do you have going over the next
Yes.
couple of months?
We
there?
have a great exhibit by Marie Crane Yvonne.
She's going to, I believe, be on at the end of May. We're taping a program with her here.
Absolutely, yes. Our next radio program, we're gonna interview her. She's a Westfield artist, born and raised in Westfield, and she's doing incredibly interesting art. She does it kind of a minimalist style, but she does a lot of interesting things. She uses stain painting, different techniques of using different materials on the surface of the painting, and she creates these wonderful. She does two main series in this exhibit that you can see. By the way, you can see at two different locations. You can see it at the Athenaeum and at the Renova building. That is the building for Westfield on weekends. Wow. So they're collaborating with us on this program. So it's a chance to see a lot of different art by Marie. And what's interesting is she does two different series. One is, and I should say, the name of the exhibit is called Shadow and Light. She explores how we see light. In one series, she portrays it through trees, how we see, if you go into the forest and sunlight is coming through the trees, she tries to capture that element. And then her other series is Seascapes, which are beautiful, these beautiful paintings with these kind of waving bands of color, incredibly interesting artist, and one I think that people will really enjoy taking a look at.
So in the course since you've arrived at the Athenaeum, and you've been there a little over, almost 2 years, right?
Yeah, a little bit over 2 years now.
Yeah, you've introduced or reintroduced these exhibitions that really showcase some of our best regional artists. Who are some of the people you have on tap for 2023-24?
Well, one of the things we're really excited about is in November, we plan to do a show of 2 centuries of Westfield Artist. We're taking artists who've been successful professionally as artists over the last 2 centuries. We're going back to the early 19th century because there were artists in Westfield who were doing really interesting work. In fact, some of our, a couple of the paintings we have in the collection give us the first pictures we have of Westfield pre-photography. And so we're going to have a show that shows these artists going back in the 19th and early 20th century, and then bring it right up to artists working today. We're hoping to feature over 25 artists in that show. So I'm really excited about that. It's going to be a chance for everyone to see 2 centuries of Westfield art and just see how, and the range is just incredible. The artists we've already identified for the show present a variety of different styles, different approaches to art. I think it's going to be a fascinating show, and I don't think anything like this has been done before. There have been group shows of Westfield artists, but nothing that has encompassed 2 centuries of Westfield art. So I'm really excited about that program.
That sounds great. We're going to take a quick break to acknowledge our underwriters, and we'll be back with more Athenaeum Spotlight. And in the second half hour, we're going to talk about icons with one of the people who, the Icon Museum in Clinton, Massachusetts, that preserves and this entire realm of art from Russia and the Byzantine and European things. But anyway, time for an underwriter announcement break. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. Guy McLean, Mark Auerbacher will return after these announcements.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Dunkin' Donut Shops of Westfield and the Sardinia family. It's nice to know that even as the world changes, Dunkin' Coffee remains the same at 7 convenient locations throughout Westfield.
Underwriting support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Greater Westfield Chamber of Commerce, the voice of business for the Greater Westfield communities. Informing, educating, advocating, the Chamber provides opportunities for members to make meaningful connections on local, regional, and state levels. For more information on the Chamber's many events, workshops, and programs, as well as the benefits of membership, visit westfieldbiz.org. The Chamber focuses on the most important economy, yours.
Join me, Tina Gorman, each week from 6 to 8 a.m. for Wake Up Wednesday, when my guests and I discuss health, wellness, and lifestyle reimagined.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB.
Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 at 89.5 FM, WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Athenaeum Spotlight, everyone. I'm Mark Auerbach with Guy McLean, and Guy McLean is the director of the Westfield Athenaeum. He's starting his 3rd year there.
Yeah.
You've really made some great changes and really brought the Athenaeum post-pandemic into the spotlight regionally. I mean, between the exhibitions that you're doing and bringing the music events that are coming to the Athenaeum on an ongoing basis, I think people throughout the region are understanding that we have this great cultural resource here in Westfield.
Well, I thought one of the things is when I came to the Athenaeum, of course we were dealing with the pandemic at that point, but we were coming out of that, and I just thought the Athenaeum it has such potential to be a cultural center for the city of Westfield and really for Western Mass. We have a great gallery space that artists love to exhibit their art in, so that's really great. We have a nice auditorium that's perfect for chamber music concerts, and so it's been wonderful working with the Springfield Symphony musicians to do various chamber music concerts. And next year, we're really excited. We had 3 concerts the last 2 seasons. We're going to up it to 4 this next year, so we're really excited about that. But I think the Athenaeum, there's such potential to do cultural programming, and I think there's a real demand. The response we've had for instance, the opening to Marie's exhibit, the reception for that, we had over 120 people attend that. It was crowded. Actually, you could hardly walk in the gallery. There were so many people in there, and to me that indicates that there's a real thirst, a real hunger for interesting art, interesting music, cultural activities, and so we're trying to do as much of that as we can, looking for every opportunity. And then also too, I felt like, why not take trips to, say, Tanglewood, and we're also looking at possibilities of maybe some museum trips to go to other museums, so that the Athenaeum can be a catalyst for extension, for people to be able to visit other museums and go to other concerts outside the area. So I'm really excited about what we're doing, and I really look forward to the next couple of years on the things that we have planned.
And I think that, as people are thinking, if you have a morning off or an afternoon off and you just want to change your routine and do something different, going to a place like the Athenaeum and maybe stopping and looking at some of the art for a bit, and you can have lunch across the street. There are a couple of restaurants,
Right.
coffee shops nearby. It's a nice break from your routine,
Yeah.
particularly in the summertime when you don't want to be cooped up in your office or doing the same routine at home every day.
Right. I think, and I'm always hearing from people about, I can't decide what I want to read a book. I can't decide, looking for a good beach read for the summer or what have you, And I always say, come into the Athenaeum. We have librarians who spend a lot of time selecting the most interesting titles, new books out there. We have a new book section, both nonfiction and fiction, new books. And so you can just come in and very easily browse the new book section, and 9 times out of 10, you're going to find something that's going to be really interesting for you. So it's another thing you can do. Break your routine, come in, and just come into and look at the new book section, if nothing else.
And the other thing that people should remember is libraries just don't have books. You could rent a DVD of a movie or a TV series or an audio book of something if you want.
Right.
And take it out, and it's all free.
Right. And you don't even have to come to the library for things like audiobooks. We have electronic books, that you can just download right to your telephone or your computer at home. Audiobooks, same thing. There's audiobooks as well. So you have lots of options. Libraries today provide the traditional experience of coming into the library, finding a book or finding a DVD, but you can also do it electronically as well. And many people do. It's amazing. Probably about 20% of our checkouts each year are through our ebook service.
I get that, because I'm dangerous if I walk into a bookstore, right? So I go in, and in our area, Barnes & Noble happens to have a cafe, and it's geographically great for me to have meetings every once in a while. But if I get there 20 minutes early, I end up spending a fortune on books that end up piling up at home. I have the unwritten book piles.
Yes.
And all that. So it's much easier if I'm going out to the pool for a couple of hours to download something and read it on my tablet.
Yeah, and I think it's really nice too. Also, too, it's a good way. Libraries provide a nice service, and it saves people like myself who like to read a lot of books. I'm always reading at least 2 books at a time, and
I was going to ask you, how many books can you read in one day?
in one day I can't get through a single book, but I will usually get through a book with about once a week. That's kind of my average, is about 1 book a week. Sometimes if it's a longer book, it's a little longer, but I usually finish 1 book a week.
What do you read? Do you read fiction or nonfiction when you're reading?
I'm the kind of reader who reads in all kinds of different topics. Right now, I'm reading a book on Gustav Mahler, the composer Gustav Mahler, and I'm reading a book on existentialist philosophy. But other times I'm reading fiction. I read novels, literature. In fact, it was just announced Juan Diaz won the Pulitzer Prize for his book called Trust. It's a great, I read it last year. It's a great book, and it just won the Pulitzer Prize. So I'll read contemporary literature. I'll read classics at times, but I'll also read biographies, history, music history, art history. I just read in a lot of different areas. And I don't know if, maybe I'm a little bit of ADHD or something, because I don't like to stay in one particular genre for too long. Some people read just one particular genre, and I have never been able to. I need to branch out and try different things.
I have three books going right now that I'm reading,
yes,
that are not work related, or because I'm interviewing an author here on the air or something like that.
Yes.
But I've got 3 going, and I have a half an hour here, and I'll read a couple of chapters in one and then put it down and come back. It would be so great for me if I could sit down and read book after book from beginning to end, instead of picking them up and moving around.
Well, and that's one of the reasons I usually am reading 2 books at the same time, is because it's nice to have the variety, just change it up. And I try to, if I'm reading a book in one, let's say a novel, I'll read a nonfiction book. I like the variety, and I think it's one thing good about libraries is sometimes you're browsing in a library, you see something that you normally wouldn't pay attention to, and all of a sudden it catches your eye, and pretty soon you're reading something in a different subject area. So I think that's always good.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break to acknowledge our underwriters. We're going to come back. We'll be chatting with Simon Morsink, who's the executive director of the Museum of Russian Icons in Clinton, Massachusetts, which is outside of Worcester. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. Guy McLean, I'm Mark Auerbach, and we'll return after these announcements.
Support for community radio on WSKB is provided by Betts Plumbing and Heating Supply Company, an independent, family-owned wholesaler serving Westfield for over 50 years, specializing in plumbing, heating, and industrial piping supplies. On the web at bettsplumbing.com or at 14 Coleman Avenue in Westfield.
Support for community radio on WSKB provided by Westfield Electroplating. Employing over 140 skilled platers, painters, and technicians, Westfield Electroplating was founded in 1946 and was the first company in the country to achieve National Aerospace and Defense Contractor Program accreditation, proudly maintaining that status for over a decade. Westfield Electroplating provides over 50 quality finishes to meet your corrosion, cosmetic, or performance needs. On the web at www.westfieldplating.com or 413-568-3716. Westfield Electroplating, putting the finishing touches on technology.
Join me, Tina Gorman, each week from 6 to 8 a.m. for Wake Up Wednesday, when my guests and I discuss health, wellness, and lifestyle reimagined.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB.
Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM, WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Athenaeum Spotlight, everyone, with Guy McLean, who's here, and I'm Mark Auerbach. You're watching us on Westfield Community Programming Channel 15, or Agawam Media, or Southwick Community Programming, or listening to us on 89.5 FM WSKB. If you missed a part of today's program, or you want to watch it again, or share it with your friends, it's archived on YouTube under WSKB Community Radio. Our guest this morning on Athenaeum Spotlight is Simon Morsink, who is the recently appointed Executive Director of the Museum of Russian Icons in Clinton, Massachusetts, which is just outside of Worcester. It's about an hour from here. And this museum is not known to a lot of people in Western Massachusetts, but it's world-renowned. And Simon is a curator and an art expert who comes to us from the Netherlands, knows a lot about Russian icons. My first question, Simon, is how come a museum like this exists in Clinton, Massachusetts?
Hello, Mark. Yes, good question. That is because of this single man, Gordon Langton, an American industrialist, the chair of, the president of NIPRO, who fell in love with icons. When was that? It was, I think, 25 years ago. During one of his travels, Gordon Langton had used to own plants around the world. He traveled a lot. During one of his visits to Moscow, he found a very simple icon of St. Nicholas, a Russian icon from the 19th century that he fell in love with. He bought it, and well, that is the beginning of the story. That was just a start, his first icon. He kept on buying, collecting. And within a few years, he collected, I think he had a few hundred icons already, Russian icons, at his home. There was not that much space left anymore to hang them on the walls. And the idea, then came up to create a museum. And here we are in Clinton, with the Museum of Russian Icons, housing the collection of Gordon Langton. That is more or less in a nutshell the story, the background of the museum that I am the director now of here in Clinton.
Now, your career has been pretty much in Europe. What brought you here to the U.S.? What attracted you to become a part of this particular museum?
Well, I am a specialist in icons, in Russian icons and Eastern Orthodox art. I studied art history. I'm an art historian, but I had, I lived in a very different world, of course, in Europe. But I had another profession, and I worked as an art dealer. I had a gallery in Amsterdam for almost 35 years, specialized in Russian icons and Greek icons, Veneto-Cretan icons, and my father founded that gallery. I'm second generation, and well, I very much enjoyed being an art dealer for almost 35 years in a row. But after all these years working as a dealer, well, I enjoyed it a lot. I had many good clients. Some of them are my best friends. And I thought, well, I want to share my experience, my knowledge, and everything that that I know about this world with a much wider audience, a broader platform. And the interesting thing about this museum here in Clinton is that it is the only specialized museum for icons in the United States. So it is a very, very special place. I had, been in touch with Gordon Langton already. He was one of my clients. So I had been here before, first time, when was that? About 12 years ago. I met Gordon in several times in London at the sales of Christie's and Sotheby's. And I also knew my predecessor, Ken Russell. So he retired, and I gave it a serious thought. Might that be something for me? And then what happened, and that was crucial in the whole story, is that Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2021. And that was, of course, that made a huge, for me and for my whole business, many of my best clients lived and still live in Moscow. That changed a lot. And that was the moment that I decided, yes, I have to do this, I have to go for it. So end of the story is that I'm here now in Clinton.
So let me ask you a question, because there might be a lot of people listening or watching today that really aren't sure what an icon is and how it fit in to the Russian and Eastern European culture, and what would be comparable in an American culture. So can you sort of explain to people what an icon is, how people collected them, and why they became such a unique art form?
Well, it's very interesting because the word icon has all these different meanings nowadays, right? With you can. I think many Americans would think, well, when you hear the word icon, there is, of course, there's Marilyn Monroe, or there are these famous basketball players, and that is what many, I think, people would now associate with the word icon. But the original meaning, the word icon comes from the Greek word icon, which means image. And it is in the Eastern Orthodox Church, it is the image of a saint painted in a very specific way. And icons were very, very important, and still are, for this world, this Orthodox world, the world of Orthodox Christianity. They play a very important role in that church. And it's a very interesting history. This whole culture is almost 2,000 years old. And icons, when you think about it, there are icons from the 14th, 15th, and 16th century. But the world of icon painting is still alive. It's a modern art form. So that is very interesting. An icon is the essence of an image. That is what you want to to show to the believers in the image. It's the essence of the person, of the saint.
If someone were to come visit the museum, and there are a lot of exhibits that you have and a lot of programs you have, how many icons are on display at any given time, and what are some of the exhibitions that you have up and coming in the next few months?
We have, when you come to the museum, and you should really do that because this is a very special place, you see mainly Russian icons in our permanent exhibition. In the main gallery, we have this fantastic collection of Russian icons, and we have big plans. We are going to reinstall the collection, the main collection of Russian icons. At the end of the year, it will be all very different here in the museum. So you should really come now and then come back in half a year to experience it in another way. We have currently an exhibition of retablos and icons, which is a very interesting exhibition where we compare the retablos that are images from Mexico, religious images from the 19th century, from the Catholic world, with Russian icons. So these images from the Orthodox world. So these are two Christian worlds that we compare in this exhibition. We focus on Mary, the Mother of God. There's another exhibition going on at the same time at Mexico State University, New Mexico State University, where they show icons from our collection and compare them with retablos from their collection, focusing on Christ. So that is a very interesting thing, these two exhibitions going on at the same time. And that is what we are currently showing in our exhibition gallery. Then we have what we are planning now is an exhibition for fall, focusing on the Mother of God of Kazan. That is one of the main prototypes of Mother of God icons in Russia. And a very beautiful exhibition of photographs of the spiritual world of Eastern Christian art. So that's just not just icons, but also churches and from different regions. So Russia, the Balkans, Greece, Bulgaria, and that exhibition will open in September.
Okay. I wanted to make a comment. I used to live in New Mexico. In fact, the New Mexico State University is in Las Cruces, New Mexico, just north of El Paso, Texas. I lived in Deming, which is about 60 miles from Las Cruces. And one of the things I was really impressed with when I was living down there is all the Hispanic art that was, because Hispanic culture is very much a part of what you see in New Mexico. There's a very close connection there. And one thing I have to say that I was really impressed with is that this connection, I'd never thought about it in how the art being produced in Mexico has a lot of similarities with Russian icon art. What gave you the idea? Because I think this is a brilliant comparison here. It gave me a whole new perspective on art that I was very familiar with when I was living in New Mexico, and it gave a really different perspective on that. What inspired this? How did this exhibit come about? Because I would never have thought about this connection until you put this together.
No, interesting. Yes, interesting that you're bringing this up. And I have a very humble answer to you. This was not my idea. This was one of the ideas of my predecessor, the former director, Ken Russell. And I think it was a very good idea, brilliant idea. And the interesting thing is that in this way, we are also serving the Spanish-speaking community here in Clinton and the region. So our text, our labels are bilingual, so in English and Spanish. So it's very interesting. We are attracting a new crowd, different audience. And you're totally right. It's exploring the similarities, but also the differences, because these are two it's Christian art, but it is different and it has different meanings. So it's a very interesting, it's an intriguing exhibition.
Well, and
So
that's one of the things I noticed. That's one of the things I noticed myself is it gave me a new insight into art I was familiar with in New Mexico, because when you compare, that's one of the things that's really good about an exhibit like this is seeing the differences as well as the similarities. It points out things that you hadn't noticed in the art before, and that's one of the things is that there are different traditions. Could you elaborate a little bit about what how Mexican art approaches religious subjects in a little different way than the Russian Orthodox approach?
Mhm. The main thing is that is the difference between Catholic art. The Mexican retablos are a Catholic religious art form, and icons are, of course, an Orthodox religious art form. And the meaning of an image in the Orthodox Church is greater, I think, than the meaning of an image is in the Catholic Church. In the Catholic Church, you look at it and it evokes feelings and emotions. And when you're looking at the image of a saint, it's very interesting. An icon with the saint really represents the saint, him or herself, through the image on earth. So there's this idea that this saint, he died, let's say 500 or 1,000 years ago. He is now in somewhere in paradise. That's because he's a saint. And now he is represented through this image, through this icon on earth. So the meaning of this, of this object is in the Orthodox Church. It's a very important thing. It's a very big thing, and that differs from the meaning of the image in a Catholic Church. So that is the main difference between images, the meaning of images, and the real value they have.
Okay, Simon, while we're talking, could you just tell people, if they want to learn more about the museum, how they get information on social media or through your website?
Yeah, that is, of course, the most important thing, the website. Go to the website. We post on Instagram, Facebook, all social media channels, and you can find all information that you're looking for. But the most important thing is really go to the museum and come over to the museum and see the icons and the retablos that we are showing now in the flesh, because that is such a great experience, and there's nothing that compares with the really experiencing the object and not just looking at your screen, at images. No, come over to the museum and see the objects in the flesh, because that is a whole different experience.
And what is the website?
It is museumofrussianicons.org.
Okay. So as our listeners and viewers are here, Clinton is just outside of Worcester. So you're looking at a museum experience. It's maybe an hour and a half at the maximum away from our listening area. And it is a one of a kind in this country, in our own backyard. So I had to throw in a little, kind of like a commercial there so that people want to go and see what we're talking about here. And how often is the museum open on an ongoing basis? And do you have...
Yes, it's open on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from 11 a.m. till 4 p.m.
Okay.
So 4 days a week. Yeah.
4 days a week. So, folks, you can plan your visit. Simon, since most of your career has taken place in Europe and you've come here to Massachusetts to work with this institution, what what are some of the things that you've learned being here about our cultural community in Massachusetts that you had no idea about when you took this job?
Good question. But there's a lot. It is a totally different world. A world that you think that you know a little bit, but you don't. So it is a completely different thing traveling to the US and as a tourist or for business, and living in the US, living in Massachusetts. What I very much enjoy is the nature and space, which it might sound like a cliche, but it is, well, compared to where I am from, the Netherlands, which is a very tiny country with 18 million people living on this tiny spot on Earth. And here there's space, there's woods, these beautiful meadows and ponds, and it's really, it's a very attractive landscape. And actually people are very nice too, I have to say. We live in Concord, my wife and I, since 3 months. And well, it's amazing how friendly everybody is and very open. You all talk on the streets to each other and greet each other, and that's a pretty interesting experience for us.
Has the museum had with the conflict between Russia and Ukraine? Has the museum experienced any pushback? Are people afraid to come because you're showcasing works of Russia, or does culture and art transcend politics?
Well, yes and no. I do not think that people are afraid to come over to the museum and see the icons and visit us. Of course, our museum is specialized in Russian icons and is part of Russian history and Russian culture. But of course, these are two different worlds, and I think that people understand that. And we here at the museum, we oppose this horrible war and the invasion of Russia and Ukraine. We have a large Ukrainian flag hanging here outside on the wall, and we stand with the Ukrainian people. At the same time, I think it's important to realize that Russian culture is a very important and very interesting culture, and it's part of world culture, and it is worth studying it. And it has, in any case, icons have a lot to tell, and us as Westerners, as Europeans and Americans. So I think, especially in these times, it's worth visiting the museum and looking at the icons and maybe contemplating a little. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in them, and it's especially now, I think, interesting to see them. I
think one of the things, this brings up a very interesting point. I've been reading a lot of articles in the New York Times, Atlantic Magazine, other periodicals talking about should we be supporting Russian culture given the situation and everything. And I think the consensus has been that there are so many important figures in opera, classical music, literature, that comes out of Russian culture. And I think you're absolutely right. Russian culture is really part of world culture, and I think we need to recognize the importance of Russian culture as a positive force in Russia that is apart from the current political situation. And I think Russian icons is very much a part of that, of a very rich Russian culture. So I really feel like it seems like to me most people in the musical world, the art world, literary world are feel the same way, that Russian culture should be celebrated.
I have a question for you, Simon. I mean, obviously, because of your expertise in Russian icons, you knew something about this museum in Massachusetts before you decided you'd come across the Atlantic and be the director. But now that you've been there for a while, is there one icon or two icons in the collection that intrigue you the most, that if somebody had a very limited time and you wanted them to see one or two items in your collection, what are they?
I would, if you would have just 5 minutes, I would go upstairs to the main gallery and walk straight to the large icon of Christ enthroned, which is the largest icon that we have in the collection. It's a monumental piece. It's a masterpiece. It's painted late 15th, early 16th century, and it is an absolute wonderful and spectacular example of Russian icon painting, medieval Russian icon painting at its best. It's full of meaning. It has a very spiritual, it radiates spirituality. There are bright colors, stylized forms. There's a lot to tell about it. I could give a lecture on that icon for just a whole day, but what you should do then is, I think, not listening to anything, just not giving lectures, nothing. Just look at it and try to really, get immersed in this fantastic atmosphere, because this is, as I see it, the essence of Russian icon painting. So it is the large Christ Pantocrator icon, Christ enthroned, in the main gallery. So whenever you come over to the museum, in any case, see that icon.
Do you have a particular period where you think Russian icon painting was at its height, or do you have a particular period that's your favorite?
It was, I think, the height of, well, that's not my opinion, but it's the height of Russian icon painting was in the 15th and early 16th century. That is considered to be the time when the best icons were painted.
We got to wrap this up because we're out of time. But Simon, thanks for joining us today on Athenaeum Spotlight. And folks,
Thank you.
An incredible museum of Russian icons, one of its kind in Clinton, Massachusetts, and we hope that you'll make a visit there. And that
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this wraps up Athenaeum Spotlight with Guy McLean and Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles has been our chief engineer. If you've missed a part of today's program or you want to watch it again or share it with friends, it's archived on WSKB Community Radio's YouTube page. We'll see you next Wednesday with another edition of either On the Mark or Athenaeum Spotlight.
I grew up on the sly, in the gutters and the streets of Petersburg. Just a kid on the fly, getting good at getting by in Petersburg. I've bartered for a blanket, stolen for my bread, learned to take my chances and use my head. A Russian rat is clever, or he ends up dead. Boils down to there are some who survive, some who don't, some give up, some give in. Me, I won't. Black and blue, welcome to my Petersburg. Standing here you can see, from the spires to the piers of Petersburg, I'd be down on that quay, selling stolen souvenirs of Petersburg. is all you know. How even when you hate it, something in you loves it so. That's where I learned my stuff, in some rough company. There's the boy growing up who was me, all I've been, all I'll be. We can do what we're told, we can go where we're led, but I learned from my father to see what's ahead. Nothing here to hold me, no one that I owe. Funny how a boy can grow. Funny how a city tells you when it's time to go. Boils down to there are some who have walls yet to climb. You and I on the fly, just in time. But tonight there's a sky and quite a view. Welcome to